Thank you very much, Petros and EMI team for inviting us and for organizing this table. Also, Matt, for your presentation. It's always very, very inspiring to hear to you. And all the people attending, I hope the information I'm sharing is useful for all of you. So I think that you can see my screen, right? I'm going to switch my camera. Okay, so as Petra said, I am going to present an analysis that we have developed with EMI team in order to understand and to complement Matt's research on attitudes, and we are more digging into the perception and representations on social media about the European Union, and in this case, in three issues that EMI were especially interested on, which are democracy, the future of Portuguese society, and the recovery plan. So I'm going through very quickly through the scope and the methodology. So we have been mapping all the conversations in Facebook during the days that you can see on the screen. And we have combined quantitative and qualitative analysis. Quantitative meaning methods like text mining, for example, which is getting a lot of text data from Facebook in this case. And through different tools and programs, we have analyzed all the text to see what subtopics were emerging. And what we have seen with this analysis is that actually there is no a lot of attention given to the European Union in Facebook. So what we did in order to have a consistent database is to also do qualitative analysis in Facebook to identify subtopics related to democracy and the future, not directly related to the European Union, but to give us insights on how this could be linked in a narrative way. So starting with the main insights that we got from our analysis, as you all I think know, there is, and as Matt has also shown, there is in general like positive representations about the European Union in Portugal and in the case of social media. Most of the criticism comes more from progressive actors in our analysis in relation to the treatment to minorities, especially refugees and migrant people, and also related to neoliberal policies that are fostering economic inequality. This also links with what Matt highlighted. We have seen the relevance in related to this of materialistic values related to the economy when framing the European Union, and we will see how to use this. In general, what we have detected in the analysis is that there is high frustration and distrust in the Portuguese politics, and of course this relates to corruption, is something that also happens in Spain. We in Commons are an organization from Spain, so I have seen a lot of similarities between both countries in our analysis. And in this case, like political parties are using the European Union, are instrumentalizing it to attack different parties and especially the government. We have seen authoritarianism not in narratives related to the European Union, but just related to democracy and especially to minorities, especially in relation to migration, but also Roma people. And this is polarizing the conversation a lot. And we have to be careful because in Spain, we had a very similar situation as in Portugal. We didn't have a strong political authoritarian forces at the moment, but as some of you may know, Vox, through very good communications targeting segments of audiences and spreading fear and hate towards these groups, they have changed the narrative about these issues like migration. So we have to take a look at this. But on the other hand, and in contrast, we have issues related to the future of the Portuguese society that are creating a lot of consensus between or among the society, like green economy, science, and technology. So these are some opportunities that could help us to frame our research. So starting with the analysis, as I said, like European representations are mostly positive. The European is seen as a civilization, like a good influence in the prosperity of the country, but also a guarantor of good values, democratic values, and so on. We have some like more ambiguous frames related to the European Union just as a financial source. What we usually do when we do narrative analysis is to try to identify which issues are dividing the society and which ones are unifying, because the ones dividing usually are harder to communicate on because there are a lot of strong emotions, a lot of reactive responses to the communication. So it is good to be aware of which issues are polarizing society and which ones are unifying in order to choose what to use when you are communicating about the European Union or any other concern that you want to communicate to a population. So regarding the divisive issues, we have seen that these are the ones where authoritarian groups are interested in. And is what I was saying. They are mostly about minorities, groups like Roma population, migration, refugees, but and also social protection. And this is interesting because we will see that there is not a link between social protections and economic inequality, and this is interesting. So as I said, the far right and conservative groups are using these issues to create us versus them narrative. So us like the hardworking Portuguese and normative citizens, and then with them which are lazy people, violent people that want to take advantage of the goodwill of the Portuguese society. And then in the other hand, we have the progressive actors who use more like very abstract concepts that we will see that are not very close to the imagination of citizens reading this kind of content. They talk about human rights, equality, dignity, and so on, but they are not talking about concrete examples that may help citizens to understand the problematic. So we have two kinds of narratives or ways of framing these issues, which is the from one side us versus them narrative, but then we have like a very also another kind of othering in a way, which is talking just about them in a very abstract way. So this is an issue that is not completely related to the European Union. We will see that in a way it is, but it is very related to democracy and inequality, and it is interesting to understand this kind of distinctions. But we have some issues that are really unifying and are very good opportunities to communicate. We have sustainability and green economy, energetic poverty, science and technology, some issues that are creating a lot of consensus. So most of people communicating in Facebook, and we access like public pages of all kinds. They have this common sense that really climate change is something urgent that it should be tackled, and that a green transition is an opportunity for social economic development. So this is something that there is no polarization at all. Also, energetic poverty, like there is a consensus that is something that cannot happen. You know, like it is not fair that salaries do not guarantee these basic living standards, and there should be well, this should be tackled and better choices should be taken. But this is not related to and I think I didn't mention it before. I'm going to go just a little bit because if you see social protection at the bottom here, it is actually polarized, this issue. It is the progressive actors, they talk about opportunities and dignity, and the far right and conservative actors talk about, you know, this otherness, like it protects lazy people, but then there is this, you know, like common understanding that really economic inequality, energetic poverty, and so on should be tackled. But these links should be done, and this is something that is a narrative opportunity and something that may have sense to try. And finally, as a solution to the problems that we have seen before, science and technology are always tackled in a way. They are talking about how investing in science, technology, innovation, and so on could help to make more sustainable economies, societies, and so on. Going through the values, we have seen that economic and materialistic values related to the economy are very important. So when you are framing your content about the European Union, it is interesting to mention these values and also democratic values like honesty and democracy itself. And when we analyzed the emotions, like most of them were negative, like frustration, indignation, anger, and they're really related to corruption of the government in relation to the funds, for example, and also these polarizing narratives that are coming from the far right. And now we are going through the issues to understand what are the main narratives that are dominating these three topics. Regarding democracy, first we have mapped which actors are communicating about this, and you can see that most of the actors communicating in Facebook are traditional media, political parties and politicians, and then we have personal blogs. And it is there's kind of a balance between progressive and conservative actors. It is interesting that authoritarianism is really important for both progressive and conservative, but they see authoritarianism in a different light. Of course, for progressive, the far right is like a threat, and they talk about it. And for conservative actors are attacking the government for having like authoritarian measures in regards of the COVID crisis. Then we have racism, and this is the same that we have mentioned before in the divisive issue, so I won't mention it, but well, again, it is a polarized topic, and it is one of the most important topics related to democracy. Migration and refugees, the same thing. So these are some sample of posts you will receive if you haven't yet this presentation as well, and you can access like the post to see more about the kind of content that we have analyzed. Regarding the future, we see that in this case, media is like the actor that is spreading more information in Facebook. And most of them are conservative, liberal, and centrist. Progressive media is less present. But we have some content about social protection, as we said before, so a little bit polarized conversation. And on the other side, we have sustainability and green economy. So what we mentioned, and it's interesting that here it is not a division between ideologies, like both kind of media in this case are sharing the importance of tackling climate change and using research and innovation to tackle that. Then we have identified some content about unemployment as well, and the role of innovation in developing the society and creating more prosperous and sustainable economy. And finally, the recovery plan, as you can see, again, is dominated by media, but in this case, most of the media that are talking about this are from center, conservative, right, and liberal. And we have a lot of pessimistic narratives of these media attacking the government. So they use the recovery plan to attack the government and talk about corruption and how Portugal is not prepared to use the funds in a responsible way. Then we have some optimistic narratives about how the EU funding is an opportunity to change social and economic structure. There is, more interestingly, critical hope, so it recognizes the complexity of the situation, the weakness maybe of democracy right now related to the corruption of the parties, but also it recognizes that the funds could help to change this tendency, and then some narratives on prosperity. So just to end, some recommendations about how to communicate regarding what we have seen in the slides. So you have seen that there is a lot of frustration and fatalism regarding the politics, but there are some narrative opportunities that can unify society, sustainability, and green economy, as we have seen. And what we have seen or what we have detected in our analysis in many countries, not just in Portugal, is that what helps better is to talk about concrete examples, not talk about sustainability in abstract or democracy, but to talk, for example, how the EU has funded like successful green initiatives and how this has helped to develop some local communities or some regions and so on. So these concrete examples that help real people can help to have this, like more material and real perceptions of the EU, not in an abstract way. The same with science and technology, how which are the most important research and development projects funded by the EU, and how it strengthens the society. And what I was saying before, like how to link, it would be interesting to see how to link energetic poverty and employment and these kind of issues with social protection, which right now has like a negative perception, at least in Facebook. Okay, so one of the main concerns that we have seen in our analysis is corruption. And this may be related to why there is a lot of young people, as Matt said, that really don't believe in democracy, but because, the definition of democracy is not very clear. Like sometimes we talk of democracy, like if we really had democracy in our countries, but sometimes, as you see how political parties works and so on, this is questioned, especially by young people. So maybe talking about how the EU is can increase government's accountability and can decrease corruption could be a good starting point for this. Um, and finally, and this is something that we have seen also in our countries, is that all the conversations about the EU are highly institutional. They are just covered by political parties, and sometimes it is not something partisan. So we recommend to try to include other kind of actors like historians, economists, journalists, and so on that could, add more diversity and engage other kind of citizens. So this is everything from my side. Uh, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Rebecca. And it is indeed clear the synergies that the two types of research can produce, and how we see certain themes emerging both through the social media listening and the general landscaping, and of course the opinion polling. And as we said at the beginning, the purpose behind this body of work, together with Commons, Rebecca and Matt, has been to improve the way we communicate with our audiences using data and analysis, because often we tend to come up with our messages and frame our messages based on our own worldviews or our own experience. And we have come to the conclusion that it's a much more effective way of getting our point across by using data and understanding the conversations that our fellow citizens are having. Because ultimately, we want to be able to spread our message, our pro European, pro democratic civil society message, to a wider audience. And that's very much at the core of this effort. We have a couple of questions for the time left, and I think they're probably both relevant to Matt and Rebecca, especially one from Dr. Avidi, who refers to the demise of fascism. Not so long ago, there was a fascist regime ruling Portugal. And to what extent, the question is, that has influenced people's perceptions towards democracy, authoritarianism, and other issues. And also the issue of corruption, whether that has come through, whether through the media listening or the opinion polling. So the legacy of fascism in Portugal, but also the problem of corruption. Have you seen that in any of the conversation? Maybe Matt, I can start with you if you can comment on either of those points.
Yeah, I think the second one is probably more for Rebecca, but the first one, the legacy of fascism, we don't measure that, but we can look at uh, the predisposition to supporting a strong leader and fascism, and that is the authoritarian questions, and there are four of them. They come from the Frankfurt School, and really the predisposition in Portugal compared to other EU countries is low. Um, I think, however, if you look at that 29% support for democracy, consistent support for democracy, and the one thing that they're falling out on, strong leader, there's some latent with older Portuguese um, uh, demand for a strong leader or comfort with that as an option if things don't go well, which is why the economy is, as you all know, is so important. Solving that so it doesn't allow that to open and become a weaponized issue. Also, can I take one sec just to comment on? I think Rebecca's points about how the EU is all sort of presented as institutional and this. In fact, it really fits with it. People just hate the bickering. And so having other people saying, hey, EU, they just did a great thing, and specifics of it, I think is very important. And I would look also, I'd add to your list just one thing, cultural influencers. Um, so it's hard to make the EU and democracy cool, but the cooler we can make it, the better it will be for especially younger voters. not just seen as this bickering thing that goes on and on. Because when they don't see solutions happening, that's when authoritarianism can get activated, and that latent fascism that's there, and it's there in every country, um, can get activated. So I hope that that helps.
Very much so indeed. Rebecca, do you have any thoughts on this latent fascism and also the influence of corruption in the public discourse?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about corruption that we haven't analyzed it itself because it didn't came like very related to the European Union, but it is always very present in the southern countries of Europe, especially, and I think also in maybe in the West. But what we have seen in general is that, and this is something that happened in all the countries, that the concept of democracy is really empty of meaning right now. Like all actors are appropriating this concept, and it depends on which actors, which country, this defining a very different way. So, and I think that young people is maybe like more aware of this than, and this is something like it's my personal opinion right now, like, but in the in the general public, not in the experts and so on, but in the general citizens, I think that what happens, especially in the countries with high corruption, is that what when you listen to media, social media, and so on, we talk about democracy as if the parties and the institutions were democratic, but it is something that it is being delegitimized in the last years, especially uh, from the Occupy movement in different countries and so on. They did a great work in showing that we maybe don't have the democracies that we would like to have, and I think that of course it is very, very related to corruption in the countries of the south, and maybe we should work on reframing what democracy is, and to have like a common ground where we could talk about this issue, because right now it's not very clear, I think.
Yeah, and just to add to that, there's just wrote a piece in the U.S. about this. Democracy as a concept is totally contested at this point. And to assume that everyone's woohoo democracy is just wrong. Um, and because through polling we can observe what should be democratic democracy support for democracy. We don't say, hey, are you for democracy or against it? Yes, different things you can put together in a scale. But the definition of it for people is very unclear, and there's great frustration. And democracy in the next 2 to 4 years through specific elections and activities that will go on is really going to be challenged. And you see the first challenge to that, the sort of second wave. It's Democracy Challenge 2.0 about to happen in Hungary in April 3rd,
Yeah.
where some very, very bad things could go on.
Indeed. And I think often that is the problem when the institutions that underpin democracy get hijacked, overtaken, and then used against democracy itself. And we have seen this in various places in Europe, both inside the EU but also outside, where democratically elected politicians then use their power, their dominance in parliament to change, in effect, the constitution, hijack several institutions that underpin the democratic system, and then claim themselves to be re-elected and re-elected, elected through democratic means, but in effect having exterminated the very basis of democracy. There is one other question actually from our audience, and that has to do a little bit with the information and knowledge, both on the EU specifically, but also in general about some of the issues that we surveyed, be it the environment or the economy. Is that something that, I mean, our viewers are concerned that our fellow citizens, the electorate, isn't as well informed as they could be in order to make the decisions when it comes to the ballot box? Is there something that is there a way that we can address that lack of information, especially about the EU's role in addressing inequalities, protecting the environment, or defending democracy in general? Matt, if you want to go first.
Well, I was going to have Rebecca go first because I always end up. I shouldn't go, Rebecca. Go.
It's not fair. Okay. Yeah, well, I think that this is related with what Matt and I were talking about, like the EU being very institutional issue and covered by, like traditional media in a very like hierarchical way. I guess, like and what happened is, like, citizens really, what we have seen, not just about the EU but in general, like citizens really want to understand the complexity of the reality that they are living right now. We are living in a very complex world, and they have a lot of questions, and they ask questions, and they look for them wherever they find it. But the thing is that, from in general, from the social sector, progressive actors, we don't know how to reach the people, and we don't do like all the efforts that I think that we should do to reach them. And these efforts, on the contrary, like the far right authoritarian actors are really doing it, these efforts to reach them. So it is, we always like focus a lot on, like the data and these kind of things, but I think that we should also like do an effort to really understand what kind of languages and what formats and so on we could use to reach the people and answer the questions. I'm sure that people in all the countries in Europe want to know what the European Union is doing for the country, and they are open to understand that and to see how the country is benefiting. So working on not just on the narratives, but also on the formats and the communications, strategic communications, I think it's really relevant.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think that's spot on. You got to first you have to talk to people and talk so that they'll listen. So you can't start from where you are at to reach them. You have to start where they are at. And Rebecca, you had talked in your presentation about really outlining specific benefits. People have to communicate with them, to reach them. Talking in terms of benefits, how does the European Union benefit them? What do they get? What specifically, how does it change their life day to day? How does it make a difference in their life? And in my presentation, I talked about the focusing on hope instead of fear. The problem is, the opposition here uses fear-based messages. The algorithms love fear-based messages, and those fear-based messages really push the buttons, especially of the people who are more likely to think the world's a dangerous place, that they might have some latent authoritarianism, they're scared, or they're marginalized economically, or they're worried that they're being left behind. So, you know, we have to become better at communicating and really communicate with broader audiences, um, and push the hope, but not just hope as in free to be you and me. Here's what it means. Here's how it makes a difference to you. And here's why it's important for you and future generations. Um, that's the key in terms of messaging. And the problem with the institutional press is they make everything a false equivalent. Uh, you know, in this country, Trump tried to subvert an election. The Democrats aren't doing a good job calling him on it. How is that equivalent? He's a traitor. He should be brought up on charges of treason, but it's a false equivalency. And so the media works as even handed. So I think there is interest in the public of getting more information, but they're not going to get it if it's in a 100-page report because they're not going to read it. So bite-sized pieces of information that show the benefit of the things we care about. And it matter and get them emotionally. You got to grab them by the heart.
Indeed. Often we spend a lot of time appealing to people's intellect, but and we neglect the need to appeal also to their heart. And maybe that's a good way to finish today's discussion. As I said at the beginning, this is a live project. We're keen to work with partners in all countries to make sure that the data and the knowledge that comes from it is applied on the ground. So please don't hesitate to contact us. Either visit listentoeurope.info or europeanmovement.eu, and you can find more information on how to work with us, Matthew, Rebecca, and other partners in this project. Once again, a big thank you to the Youth Council for their support in organizing this.
Yeah.
It has been a pleasure to see both of you, Matt and Rebecca, again. And we look forward to working with you in the future, both in Portugal but also around Europe. Have a good afternoon and enjoy the rest of the week. Thanks a lot.